Welcome to Conveyancing Matters with Lorraine and Stu. Join us for a chat about all things property.
Well, Stu, the silver fox of conveyancing, Rob Hailstone joins us again. Rob, just delighted to see you with Bold Legal behind you. Got to ask you first off, what else is behind you?
Well, first of all, I like silver fox, but I think it's more a case now of grey old dog, to be honest. But I'll go with silver fox.
You could have been calling me that, Rob.
No, I wouldn't dare do that.
For that.
I wouldn't dare. Behind me is obviously the Bold Legal Group banner, and either side of that are two paddle boards, my paddle board and my brother-in-law's paddle board. And to the right of me is a kayak, and in front of me is £350 worth of Christmas booze.
Does that mean, Rob, you've been asked not to go home, mate, and that's where you are now until January the 4th?
Well, I did wonder why I've been here for a week now. Yeah.
Funny. Well, because you made the national news on a paddleboard, didn't you?
I wouldn't say it was national, but yeah, I was going down to the beach. First time I had the paddleboard, and there were a few coppers running up and down, and they said, "Oh, could you paddle out to that little bit of sand over there? We can't get to it. Some drug dealers have just chucked some drugs on the beach." I said, "Well, I can't paddle out there because I've never stood on the blooming thing, but I did swim out there and collect 2 bags of cannabis and swim back with it."
Excellent.
And it did make the local news. Yeah.
I think it might have made it onto the actual big BBC actual website, Rob.
In fairness, a 3-year-old with water wings could have done what I did.
Yeah, but hey, but that 3-year-old wasn't there, mate. It's opportunity, Rob. It's take it when it's offered. That's the thing.
Luckily, I took my water wings off.
Yeah. What did you do with the 3rd bag of cannabis, Rob, that nobody saw?
Yeah, well, moving swiftly on.
It's with the booze in front of him.
Yeah. So, Rob, it's really kind of you to join us again. Another tumultuous year. Stu and I can't quite believe that we're at the end of this year already. It's so delighted to see you. And obviously, you've probably, of anybody we know, you've really genuinely got your finger on the conveyancing pulse in a way that nobody else has, simply just because of the reach of Bold Legal and everything that you do. So we thought it would just be really nice to chew the fat with you about clearly about the last year and maybe have a think about looking ahead to 2022. So, well, the floor is yours, Rob. Where do you want to start? Should we start with, have we had any high points of 2021? There's been plenty of low points, I think.
Well, I'd like to think that the high point is the income for firms and hopefully for some of the conveyancers. I know it's been extremely hard earned. And maybe they would like to reduce that income slightly and reduce the work levels slightly. But hopefully the income and hopefully that income has been paid to the coalface conveyancers and not just kept by the business owners. Stu?
Sorry, I didn't hear you there, Rob. What was that, sorry? I think it has. I mean, let's be honest. I think with the shortage of staff that there has been, with the turnover of work that there is, it has led, I would have said, wages to increase, stuff like that. So I would have said it has been shared around. But I think from my perspective, the problem's not necessarily the volume of work. It's the peaks and troughs. It's the roller coaster up and down every 5 minutes. And of course, it's all very well doing 100 completions on one day. And then the next week, you haven't got any.
Yeah.
So over the course of a year, we're now in a bit of a dip. But it's the up and down of it that's been the problem, not maybe the total volume. And of course, if you knew that you're going to have X amount of work, you could maybe plan for it. But of course, this year's just shown us with the amount of peaks and troughs we've had. And we were saying earlier, normally you'd expect maybe 2, would I be right? Maybe Easter and Christmas to be a natural peak for conveyancers, times to avoid. Normally we'd have maybe like low points through maybe July, August, where it's a bit quieter. But this year, of course, you've had March, the aborted holiday. You've then had April and Easter. You've had obviously June, September, and now we're back into Christmas. So we've really not had a rest from it.
Yeah, and of course, fees have gone up, which is great, and I hope fees stay up. But the problem is that one of the unintended consequences of that is that pre-I premiums have gone up because they base the premiums on turnover as well as other things. So that's a bit of a negative, I'm afraid. But please keep the fee levels up. Don't go racing back down to the bottom again.
I think that's really important for the industry, isn't it? We've been given a bit of an opportunity here to sort of put a proper stake through these fees and keep them at a level that really is representative of what we do. We really don't want to be going back to years ago and doing things for nothing, I'm sure.
But we don't know what the market's going to bring, do we?
That'll be the problem.
We could try and predict it. It's certainly not going to be as busy as this year unless something dramatic happens again. And let's hope it doesn't really. But what are the market conditions going to be next year? Are you going to be fighting for work, or is it just going to level off a bit?
I think we will be. I think it's already sort of dipped to a point that we all needed. Whether that's a 20% dip, I'm not sure, but it's dipped to a point that we all needed. I think going forward, of course, in any industry, there's always going to be competition, and certain people will always slash fees as a business sort of proposition, won't they? So they'll do cheap conveyancing. But I think, from where I sit, I came into the industry when the fees were plummeting. And in fact, 25 years ago, when you think, the fee was probably what it is now, I would say, in terms of profit margins within a file. But what we do now is so far in excess of what we did 25 years ago. It's ridiculous. And I've got to say this before, I don't know any other industry that does the volume of work that we do on a matter that gets rewarded in the way we do. I really don't.
Well, also taking on that level of risk. I mean, it's not just the volume of work, is it? And it links to Rob's point about PI. It's actually the risk that goes with it. That, of course, so many people out there and our clients really sort of fail to understand. They don't really want to understand. And I'm always interested, because you do hear a proportion of property lawyers just saying, well, all the client wants to do is move and they don't care about anything else. And I think that's a bit of I'm not necessarily sure I agree with it, but I think, again, to come back to your earlier point, Rob, I do think that's a failing on the part of the profession, that we don't sell ourselves, and we don't our clients don't really understand what we do, and they're not really actually understanding what they get for their money.
Well, I don't think they want to understand what we do until it goes wrong.
Yes.
And then they want to understand why it goes wrong and what they can do or anybody else can do to put it right. And I think, the Simplify issue has highlighted that, forgetting the security incident for now. But looking at the Facebook group, when conveyancing goes rogue, there's lots of people, 1,200 people in that group now who have suffered as a result of the issues. And they are being mopped up. That's a fair thing to say, I think. But you could see from some of the posts, they're saying, well, what is an inquiry? What is a search? Who holds the deposit? What's the difference between exchange and completion? They don't even know those basic, what we consider to be basics. They don't know those, but they don't want to until it goes wrong. So it's a difficult one to get across to them, really.
It is, but I think, and it's a difficult conversation to have. I mean, they've got their, the Simplify group, they've got their business model. But a lot of that model, not necessarily just theirs, is about really taking the people out of the process and replacing it with, tech and the written word and, apps and all the rest of it. And they will be able to say, well, we provided this information to our clients and they've, clicked on, something in the app to say that they've received it, read it and understood it. So we've discharged our duty. But
we all do that every day to dozens of things every day. We don't read it and understand it.
But in most cases, though, Rob, we're probably not spending 400 grand on a house, I suppose, is the point, isn't it?
In most cases, no. But we're still buying expensive items, and we don't read the T's and C's, and we tick them off and signing up to things that we don't know really what we're signing up to. But because the T's and C's generally are too complicated and too long.
I think they are, but also I would say in most cases they're, as I say, they're not as life-changing. If you don't get the whatever it is that you thought you were buying, it's not as life-changing as not getting your house. I
think you're right, Lorraine. I think there's a lot of clients now, a lot of lawyers, and any kind of dealing that you generally have, it's people are trying to litigate everything all the time, and that's the difference. Those T's and C's, you have to have that. You have to have long T's and C's. You have to cover off every possible permutation of things that might go wrong that might not be our fault. So there's an element of both. I can see why people want to make that automated process as automated and get things out as possible and clicking here, accepting this and accepting that. But we kind of do it on a dual basis where, we do all of that to protect ourselves. And we always have a series of reports to clients, dropping snippets of information in that might be relevant at that point. But still, clients don't really want to read it and take that on board. I'm not so sure that their thirst for the information is as prevalent as what we might think that would be. I think it's like you say, Rob, only when it goes wrong.
Yeah.
And also, I don't really think they think they're going to lose their 400,000 if something goes wrong. They think there's going to be a delay in completion. It's only the very rare fraud cases, etc., where they could lose that money. On a day-to-day basis, they're not going to lose their money. They're just going to have a miserable experience and a late completion.
But that's often enough, isn't it? But Rob, on the obviously on the issue of Simplify, and as you say, sort of cyber issues aside, really, what this has done, as you've noted and commented on, has brought the old chestnut of referral fees sort of back into the arena, really as a side issue, and lots of a number of their clients claiming they didn't know that referral fees were being paid for work from certain online estate agents. I mean, what's your view? I mean, arguments sort of aside, what's your view on referral fees generally, Rob?
I have to tread a tricky line on referral fees. I've got 650, 700 member law firms. Half pay referral fees and half don't. So whatever I'm going to say, I'm going to accept one half probably. My personal view is that I saw brown paper bags of cash being handed over in the 70s and 80s at dinners with estate agents by my boss. And that was a fact that went on. So I think if you ban referral fees now, they'll go underground. It might not be brown paper bags full of cash. It will be something else. So I don't think it's a sensible suggestion, say ban them completely. They will still be there. My view is make them more transparent, make sure they're policed and make sure they're enforced. What I would like to see is a percentage cap on the legal fee. So say a 20%, 20% cap. So if you're charging £1,000, the maximum fee you can pay to an agent is £200. And what's interesting about that, if you think it through, or as I did eventually, is that the agent might say, hey, put your fees up a little bit because they get a bigger referral fee.
Oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting. I think the policing it's difficult. I think what the government I think has displayed, and you'll give us some insights, Rob, on the Future Gov initiative that you mentioned when we were off air. But I sort of instinctively get the feeling that the government, doesn't want to step into the arena, and there's so many elements of the property process already that need some form of oversight, regulation, input, whatever that I just get the impression that there won't be that much appetite to do the same for referral fees. But tell us a bit about the work you've done with Future Gov.
Oh yeah, but I referral fees are being looked at by trading standards. I know that for a fact. And what will happen, I don't know. I posted a comment on an estate agent magazine today saying, look, if you're an estate agent, don't recommend a client to somebody you wouldn't want to instruct if you were buying a property. Referral fee or no referral fee. That's got to be the correct and moral way to go, I think.
Are morals a big part of what the big boys do, Rob?
No comment. Yeah. And I don't say that very often.
It's an interesting one. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I don't honestly think that the person who's perhaps part of whose income, the bottom line of what they take home depends on how many referrals they get through or how many referrals they make. I honestly don't. They won't know the conveyancer to whom a matter is being referred. They are just referring to a large organisation. So I'm.
Yeah, and it might not just be morals. They are big businesses. They're limited companies. They have shareholders. They have different things to think about than maybe some of the high street law firms do.
So tell us about Future Gov, Rob.
Well, we've got the home buying and selling group, obviously, and they've been doing a pretty good job in the last 3 or 4 years. But the government are once again looking at the home buying selling process. And they've appointed, I think, a consultancy agency called Future Gov to look into what's going right, what's going right and what's going wrong in the profession. I think they've now interviewed about 45 so-called industry experts, from lenders, estate agents to conveyancers, and people like me. And they're putting something together to send to the government to look at early in the new year that they may or may not pick the bones out of. And who knows, even mandate one day. I'm not saying that is going to happen, but it's not off the table, I don't think, completely. And the way it's leaning is, I hate to say it, once being a HIP provider myself, is information up front. And they're looking at information up front and getting something completed by the seller on day one, either via the estate agent or maybe bringing the conveyancer in on day one, which I would love, obviously, and bringing in a lot more information from trusted sources. So local search information, maybe title information, environmental information, getting all in from a trusted source so that the potential, the seller and the potential buyer can see it up front. And I think also trying to interpret it in such a way that the potential buyer can actually understand it. What I'm hoping they're not doing is dumbing down the conveyancing process. And the only thing left is to look at the title, which obviously in some cases with a simple registered title can be quite easy. And maybe AI will do that one day. So I'm a little bit concerned about the future of the profession going forward, let's say 5 or 10 years.
Hopefully we won't all be doing it by then, Rob.
Well, we might not have a job to do.
Yeah, well, there is that, I have to say. What's your view, Stu?
I'm a bit 50-50 on this matter, because I'm still not 100% on what clients have a thirst for at the onset of the transaction. I still go back to that sort of viewpoint that a lot of clients, they see that property, how much is it? They do their own comparables by searching online, and basically, can I get a mortgage on it, and how much does it cost me a month? I'm not sure the volume of information that they would want to see. I can understand the adage of it speeding up the conveyancing process, obviously. I mean, we've done something similar here for years. After HIPs, we just carried on, without the searches, trying to get clients to complete information up front, tried to get estate agents involved, but there was always a massive reluctance for estate agents to become involved at that point. So I can't see moving forward that they would want to be party to it. I'm not sure whether, what we listen to, I think, from an industry, they might purport to want to be involved, but I'm not sure on the ground whether your standard sort of estate agent in the office wants to be involved in data collection. But who knows? I don't know. I'm just not sure what the thirst is. So, of course, if you've got a local search sitting in a pack that a buyer can read, I'm not sure what advantage or interest that's going to be to them. If they won't read our T's and C's, are they going to read a local search? And then who's then reporting to them on that point? Does that bring up contentious issues that they might then, not buy the property because of it without a lawyer interpreting them?
Well, what I find staggering and somewhat disappointing is that, 45, 50 years ago when I started, 45 years ago, most land was unregistered. We were doing personal completions, no email, no internet, et cetera, et cetera. But it was quicker, easier, and less stressful. And looking at it over the last few weeks, I think what's happened is back then we may have had, say, 7 big plates to spin at any one time, the title being the biggest plate. Now I think conveyancers have 15 or 20 smaller plates, and the title is one of those smaller plates. I think the job is actually more challenging now than it was back then. Maybe not academically with titles, but it's more challenging keeping 15 or 20 plates spinning.
Yeah, that's definitely a point Stu's made before, Rob. Definitely, isn't it, Stu?
Yeah, I mean, it's 100% more challenging. But if you go back 25 years, I'd see most of the clients face to face and wouldn't even think about checking their ID or looking at where their money's come from. Wouldn't even be a consideration back then. I mean, yeah, the job now of ID investigation and AML and linking clients to the property that's being sold is enormous, absolutely enormous. It takes a considerable amount of time. And of course, that was just one thing we never even thought of before. You look at this, all sort of leasehold aspects of transactions now. Again, there's so much that keeps going up again and again and again. that the job's just got bigger and bigger and bigger. More complex, I'd say it's about the same, but more complex in that there's more to do as a generalisation, certainly.
But you don't spread a whole load of deeds across your office floor trying to match plans up like I used to anyway back in the 70s.
Well, true.
We'll have the challenge of photocopying them.
Yeah.
Rob, that was always a bit of a joy, wasn't it? But of course, what I do see now, and because I'm old, there's no doubt, which I find actually sort of sad and annoying in equal measure, really, is when you do have an unregistered title. And I, as you know, still locum and still sort of stay at the coalface, because I think it's really important to sort of maintain my currency, really, to actually say, yes, I still do it and I understand the challenges you're dealing with. And I see sort of, well, as regularly as one can these days with unregistered titles, just no epitome front sheet, everything photocopied. Even 2 days ago, I saw a land certificate that somebody had very carefully and assiduously photocopied and saved. And it wasn't as if it contained a document that they hadn't already downloaded from the land registry. And as I say, with unregistered documents, it's just everything. And just no appreciation, no understanding of the significance of any of it. And some might say, well, look, Lorraine, you're an old fart, you're of your time, you're not on the cutting edge anymore, love, go away, what do you know? But they're all things that will hold up a chain, because if somebody in that chain doesn't understand what they're supposed to do with those documents, they're not going to understand my inquiries about those documents, and so you've got weeks of delay and difficulty as a result. And that's what I find a bit concerning. It's that this sort of pyramid structure of, lawyer at the top and everybody else, I'm not necessarily convinced sort of serves a lot of chains we're in. I don't know how you see that, Rob, from your angle.
Well, I'm just thinking maybe we have two sets of sort of conveyancers out there at the moment. You've got the seasoned conveyancers who know how to do the job like we used to do it. You've got the modern conveyancers who don't know how to do it like we used to do it, but know how to do it now. So you've got to split the work accordingly, I think. For those that are experienced in unregistered, etc., give it to them. And those who are experienced in the modern world of technology, give it to them.
Yeah, it's
and try and bring some of the older ones along with the technology as well. Yeah,
but it's interesting, Rob, because I and I think I've ranted about this before, but I again was locuming, and it was in November, and a matter had been dragging on since August, and we were acting for a first-time buyer, lovely lass, and this was her second. The first place she tried to buy had fallen through. And long story short, inexperienced paralegal on the other side, delightful person from one of the big outfits, tried to draft a statement of truth, Rob, just to deal with, the fact that the title plan was not accurate. And it was just pitifully awful. And we went back and said, not acceptable. And I kid you not, that was in the August. And it took them until the November to come back with an actual statement of truth, in which, bless them, they had just given a statement of truth about, as it transpired, the whole title. It was just grim, and it was the relatively very straightforward thing to do. Hadn't been escalated to a lawyer, and my guess is now that transaction has fallen apart as a result.
That's probably lack of supervision, I think. Don't you?
Completely,
yeah,
completely. But it's serving nobody. But that's an outfit that will say, look at how fantastic our customer reviews are, and we'll go to awards and get lots of awards.
Well, I think the time for that is going to be over soon, because it's going to be a tougher market. There's no doubt about that. You've got to perform at your best in the future, I think.
So what is your view on 2022, Rob? We sort of said it before we went on air, we didn't want to sound too depressing, but inevitably the market's falling a bit. What's your view?
I think if I had a practice now, I'd be thinking about the future, about the amount of work that may or may not come in the future, and I'd be looking to strengthen or renew my relationships with my business contacts and make some new ones. And I don't just mean online by email. I mean once we're allowed to do it again, if we're ever allowed to do it again, go out and meet your local agent, talk to them, have a beer with them, have a chat to them, have a coffee with them, meet the new ones, think about the future, because I think as sure as eggs are eggs, it's going to get tougher, and you're going to need more work streams coming in.
Definitely. And how are you finding it, Stu?
Well, it's definitely dipped. I mean, I obviously advocate exactly what Rob said. We've been doing that anyway. I always think that, you need to be ahead of the curve, and if you're reactive to it and, start doing that next year once you've had a tough first quarter. The problem is that those that were more eager and ahead of the game are out there and already secured those relationships. So I think law firms should be doing that now rather than waiting for a dip. But it's really interesting. The first quarter of next year will be particularly interesting to see whether a lot of people sort of moved and your pipeline was really pulled forward. But the demand is incredible still. And obviously all the agents are moaning that there's not enough stock to put on the market. It's really hard to sort of gauge what next year could be like.
Yeah, it goes quiet at this time of year anyway, doesn't it? We're just before Christmas, so people aren't going to be putting their properties on the market. We don't really know what's going to happen next year. Interest rates aren't too bad, but will they stay like that? We're not sure. You've got to prepare for a rainy day, and I think you've got to start doing it now. Estate agent, as you touched on earlier, Stu, conveyancer relations aren't always great. Let's look at improving those as well, I think. And it would be good if they could license or regulate estate agents. And most estate agents are saying that themselves. And I think we would have more respect for them. And those regulated agents might have more respect for us as well, because they'd understand the conveyancing process a little bit more.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's an interesting one, Rob, actually, because I sort of get the feeling, sort of very much from the outside looking in, that this is an idea that, the agency profession sort of runs towards periodically and then hastily retreats from, and nobody really, picks up the ball and runs with it, do they?
No. We've tried, but relationships have changed over the last 2 years. We don't see people. We don't meet people. It has become more fractious, I think. But if the market goes quieter, the agents are going to want us to look after those individual transactions more than perhaps they did this year, because they don't want any to fall through. So they will be looking at, I think, instructing better conveyancers.
I hope so. And what's maybe to conclude, Rob, because you're one of those lovely guests that we could chat on to for hours, really. But what's your, because I think you do have this sort of unique position in the conveyancing profession, with Bold Legal and the various committees that you're on and the insights that you give. So, where do you feel that the conveyancing profession is? I mean, Stu's a part of it in his corner of the world. I see lots of little bits of lots of firms, but I think you do have a perspective that the vast majority of people don't. So where do you think conveyances and conveyancers are?
I think we could be at a crossroads. I think what this year has shown me is the sheer number of conveyancers who really do give a damn, who've worked so hard over the last 12 months, 18 months, 20 months. They are out there and they do care, despite what some in the industry might say. So yeah, no, they're out there. I think going forward, there's a good place in the market for them, but you've got to look for that work. It's not going to come to you, and others will be after that work. So yeah, no, it's been a tough year. It's been a good year. It's been a revealing year. Everybody deserves a good Christmas break now, but you're only as good as your last game. Your last game is nearly over. You've got to be ready for next year, and that's the next game. Yeah,
that's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I think everybody feels that. I feel that even just as a freelancer, Rob. I'm busy now, but I'm always sort of at any particular given point, I'm always thinking, okay, well, what am I going to be doing in 2, 3, 6 months, 12 months time? You've always got that kind of looking ahead aspect to it, I think.
Yeah, and the other thing that surprises me and shocks me is the sheer amount of questions that I get by email, but more particularly now on the online forum that we've got. 630 people in the forum. I would say 5 in 10 questions being posted a day. We have a problem with this. We have a problem with that. The job is far more complicated. But fortunately, lawyers will come back and say, well, I had a similar problem last week. This is how we dealt with it, et cetera, et cetera. So it's great. self-help group, but it's not an easy job by any stretch. And even though I said it's slightly different from 45, 50 years ago, I wouldn't want to be doing it now, to be honest. It's very, very tough. Hats off and full respect to them.
Well, that's a good thing for you to hear, Stu.
Yeah, it certainly is, isn't it? It is a really, really, really difficult job now. And, you know, we're not just expected really to do conveyancing, which is a transfer of title from seller to buyer. We're expected to do far, far more than that and virtually manage a moving process. And, you know, albeit there are people that have left the industry over the last year, I think what next year will provide also is opportunity for people to potentially train and come into the industry. There's now more training entities out there. There's going to be vacancies. I don't think the work will dip to a level that will affect that. So I think there'll be opportunities next year for people that are looking to make the step up and potentially become fee owners. And
maybe if we're coming to an end now, the final bit is, are too many people going out of the top and not coming in at the bottom, i.e. retiring, and we haven't got enough fresh blood coming in?
I would say definitely, yeah.
I would think that's probably true, Rob, actually. Well, I also, though, wonder, given the number of people number of organisations across social media I see sort of repeatedly saying we're hiring, we're hiring, we're hiring. I mean, a point Stu and I have made before is this whole, you know, COVID sort of period has led lots of people, I think, at all levels to reevaluate. And there are people, you know, leaving the conveyancing profession because they don't want the pressure, they don't want the hassle, they don't want, you know, that amount of responsibility and aggravation for the amount of money they're being paid. They don't want, and fundamentally, they don't want the disrespect from the clients, which I hate to say, I think is probably going to continue just as a general, you know, attitude. And but I do think there are people, you know, at the lower levels, Rob, that are leaving and just saying, oh, bugger this for a game of soldiers. I'm going to go off and do something where I'm perhaps physically and emotionally and, you know, and financially more well rewarded, or perhaps not financially more well rewarded, but actually I don't care because my priorities have changed. So yeah. I think we've got, you know, I think actually, I think a point you made earlier, perfect storm. I think we've got people leaving at both ends of the profession, which is going to be a challenge.
Is conveyancing ever suggested by a careers officer at school or college these days? I doubt it.
Doubt it.
And we need to do something about that, because the job isn't completely awful. It's a very rewarding job at times, both sometimes financially, certainly on a personal basis, when you help somebody buy their dream home. But it's got to change in some way. It's got to be made better for the coalface workers, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. And well, maybe that is a positive note to end on, Rob, because I think it can be a good career. I do think it relies on good employers, I have to say, who are prepared to invest in their people and invest in the training of their people, because they're the people that are going to retain staff and enable those staff to get better and move up to fill the void at the top, I have to say.
Yeah, and I even now I do miss the joys of completing transactions on a Friday and getting the house that the client wanted. Yeah, very rewarding on a Friday before your weekend if that happens.
Yeah, and I've said for years, and I think it's true, and Stu and I say this quite a lot, but this is still very much a people industry. And I've always said, if a lawyer forgets the significance to the client of exchanging and just thinks, oh, well, you know, I'll exchange on Monday because I don't want to do it today because, you know, Friday I'm going to bunk off a bit early. I think if a lawyer forgets the importance to the client of what they're doing, they shouldn't be doing it.
Absolutely.
And I think we've said as a recurring theme, Stu, really, haven't we, the people aspect that all of the prop tech in the world can never replace.
Definitely.
And there is some new prop tech to look out for next year, I think, the likes of Koju, et cetera, et cetera. So things are changing, and hopefully in a good way.
Yes, let's hope so. Well, Rob, it's really, really delightful to catch up with you again. Paddleboards are just a revelation, to be quite honest with you. So thank you for bringing them along. And
I didn't bring them, they're here.
Yeah. And just thanks from Stu and I for taking the time, because we really do appreciate it, and we do appreciate your insights.
No, and thanks for what you are both doing. It's a great medium that's really taken off. Hats off to you as well.
Oh, bless you. Thanks, Rob. Well, take care, and we'll hopefully see you soon.
Happy Christmas.
And you.
Take
Bye.
care. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.